What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, go ahead and watch part 1 right now. This is part 2 of Rugby Explained for an American football fan. Let's get back into it.
Start the history portion of this video is by acknowledging that most forms of football played around the world trace their roots back to the football games played in medieval Europe, and medieval England in particular. These games belong to a wider category of game that has been played around the world throughout history, in which two groups of people, and it's usually a large number of people, compete with one another to kick, carry, and or toss a ball or other object into some sort of goal or across some sort of line or into some sort of goal area, almost always through violence. This type of game was already known by the name football in England by the 1300s, and the name football appears to have been in wide use by the 1500s.
Why has, every game been called football?
Today, these medieval games are often called mob football to evoke the chaos and anarchy that define them. And football was often banned by kings and within various jurisdictions due to the destruction and injury that it brought. By the 1800s, this type of game was being played in a more organized way at schools and sporting clubs throughout the English-speaking world, including the United States and Canada. Up until the mid-1800s, each school or club played by its own rules, and these rules could differ greatly. So when schools played against one another, they had to agree on the rules of each individual match. Eventually, standard forms of football developed, and the first one to catch on widely was a version played at the Rugby school in England. This is the game that the modern forms of rugby descend from, and it was the version of football that directly inspired what we now call football in America. McGill University in Montreal was the first North American school to base their rules on rugby rules, which had been brought to Canada by British soldiers. Harvard University's football team then learned this version of football during a series of matches between the two schools in 1874. Rugby-style football...
Okay, so that's interesting. So rugby started in the United States around the same time college football did. That's crazy. Did not know that. I forget what year it is, but I know there's a couple teams in the 1860s, or like 1866 or something. It might have been like 10 years before this, but still very interesting. Did not know that. That's crazy.
Soon spread to other universities, including Princeton, Yale, Tufts, Columbia, and the University of Michigan, and quickly became the most popular form of football in the United States. In fact, for the first few decades of American football, the terms rugby and football seem to have been used interchangeably. And when we look at the rule books from the time, we see that early American football resembled rugby much more closely than what we would identify as American football today.
Interesting.
And even though American football has...
Yeah, I mean, a punt out, touchdown, kicker side must be behind the ball when it's kicked. Touch, if a ball goes into... Yeah, wow. They were using touchdown and touch. Interesting.
Its own distinct sport. There are still some vestiges of its roots as what you could call a variation on rugby football.
That's like blowing my mind. I didn't know that at all. I didn't even know what rugby was until probably like 2 years ago. Wow. I've never even heard of a team being here. I didn't even know we played rugby here.
For example, we still call this a touchdown, even though we are long past the point where a player has to actually touch the ball down on the ground to score as they do in rugby. All right, I hope knowing that bit of history helps put everything into context. Let's go on now and talk about the most significant difference between the two codes of rugby.
The biggest difference between rugby union and league.
As you could tell from the general overview, the two codes of rugby share a lot in common, and the majority of their differences are easily explained. And this makes sense because up until 1895, there was only one code of rugby. The split happened because a group of teams in northern England felt that they were being overlooked by the London-based Rugby Football Union, and also because they wanted to get paid. It seems unthinkable today, but the idea of a full-time professional athlete is actually a relatively new thing. And this topic is interesting enough that it probably deserves its own video. So let me know in the comments if you would be interested in that video. Anyway, so in 1895, that group of teams in Northern England created their own governing organization, which eventually became known as the Rugby Football League. And the two codes of rugby began evolving independently of one another.
Okay, so rugby union was the one that everyone played, and then they separated to start rugby league in 1895. That's interesting. Edition, rugby league became popular among the working class in Australia due to players wanting to get paid, which was not allowed by the Southern Rugby Union at the time. Okay. Today, rugby league has a reputation as being the working class version of the rugby game, even though both codes of rugby are now fully professional. Okay.
Today, the two codes are different enough from one another that they are generally considered to be two distinct sports. We covered most of the differences between rugby union and rugby league already, but there's one difference that to me is significant enough that I think it deserves its own section of this video, and that is what happens after a ball carrier has been tackled. This fundamental question has a dramatic effect on the strategy, gameplay, and overall flow of the action in rugby. And ultimately, this question defines the distinct personalities of each game. You'll remember from the general overview that a tackled player in rugby is required to give up the ball, and the tackling defender is required to release the tackle. This applies to both rugby codes. What happens next is unique to each game. Let's get into it, and we'll start with rugby league because rugby league operates much more like American football after a tackle. In rugby league, which again is the one that's more popular in Australia and has the field similar to American
newer
football,
one.
each team can only maintain possession of the ball for 6 tackles. So this is similar to the 4 downs in American football, but you can think of it as 5 downs because they consider the tackle after a punt or a kickoff to be the 0 tackle.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense. Anyway, in rugby league, after the ball carrier has been tackled, the defense is required to clear out at least 10 meters and allow the offense to play the ball uncontested. This is officially called the play the ball. So you can think of rugby league as having a...
It's called play the ball. That's so funny. I feel like all these terms and stuff, you can 100% tell they're from so long ago because it's just like touch, play the ball, scrum. It's like, I don't know. It doesn't sound like a professional term.
10-meter neutral zone after each tackle. The exception to this are 2 defenders called the markers who are allowed to be near the ball, but they're not allowed to interfere. So I guess they're there to keep the offense honest. I don't know. Any defensive player besides the markers who has not retreated 10 meters is considered offside. So they have to get onside before they're allowed to affect the game in any way. In rugby league, there are no first downs. So a rugby league offense has to score before its 6th tackle or else it gives up possession. This means that if it...
Interesting. So, what you're saying is rugby union might be slower because they can hold the ball as long as they want. They can pass it back as long as they want and keep going forward and backwards. They can hold on to the possession the entire game. They can win 5-0 if they wanted to. They're probably not going to, right? Okay, interesting.
If a team is on its 6th tackle and is not close to scoring, the team will usually just punt the ball away like in American football. The difference, of course, is that the punt is a live ball in any form of rugby. So if a member of the offense catches it, they can try to score or at least push the ball as far as possible on their final tackle.
But usually they're doing it to be like, all right, if you get that, you get that, bro. Here, take it.
As opposed to American football where a team fully gives up possession by punting. If a team does not score and gets tackled a 6th time, they become the defense and have to clear out 10 meters so that their opponents can play the ball uncontested.
Okay.
Real quick, because I know it will come up.
Okay, so just like how on 4th down, you have 4 downs in the NFL, but on 4th down, you usually punt the ball away because you don't want the other team to have the ball right there if you don't make it. Kind of similar to the 5th down and the 6th down in rugby, or the 5th tackle and 6th tackle, I'm sorry.
Up in the comments, I will say that there are a few ways that a team can get a fresh set of 6 tackles, and those are outside the scope of this video.
Probably like penalties and stuff.
After a tackle in rugby union. In rugby union, the ball is always live and it's always able to be contested. So in rugby union, there's no concept of uncontested possession or downs. And there's no limit to the number of times an offense can be tackled while they have possession of the ball. If the ball carrier is tackled in rugby union and the defender is able to get to the ball before the offense, it's a turnover, which is pretty good on the defender. Because of this possibility, there's almost always a teammate of the ball carrier ready to receive the ball after a tackle.
Yeah.
And the defense often doesn't try to contest this handover. But it's
Okay, they usually don't because they're usually okay, I got it. They're usually around the ball carrier just in case he loses the ball or something so that the enemy team doesn't get it. I got it.
also common for the defense and the offense to both engage over the ball after a tackle, which creates a situation called a ruck. The ruck is a vocabulary term and is an official thing in rugby. Once the referee announces a ruck has formed, there are strict rules governing what is allowed to happen to keep things from becoming a violent free-for-all. For example, players are required to remain on their feet during a ruck, and players can only join the ruck from the back from their perspective. The most significant rule, maybe, is that players are not allowed to place their hands inside the ruck, which means that players need to use their feet to bring the ball to the back of the ruck, and or players need to physically
Bro, this looks so silly to me. I'm sorry. I know it's not, and when I watch it, I'll be like, okay, I mean, yeah, that's fine. But to an outsider that has never seen this before, come on, just a little bit. It's a little silly. Come on.
push the ruck or engage with the bodies of the opposing team so that a player at the back of the ruck or from outside of the ruck can pick up the ball. Rucks are often resolved quickly, but sometimes they get extended, for lack of a better term. That's all we're going to say about the ruck in this video. There is a link in the description if you want more.
I cannot wait to watch this
that's
game.
That's the biggest difference between rugby league and rugby union, at least to my eye. And it's what gives each of these sports their own personality. Because the offense is guaranteed the ball after most tackles, the action in rugby league is more predictable and compartmentalized, and it's easy to make sense of it if you're coming at it from the perspective of an American football fan. Rugby union is more kinetic and is more of a perpetual scramble because the ball is essentially always live, even after a tackle.
Yeah.
Recommendations and final comments.
All right, so now that you've got the basics of rugby in your mind, I recommend following this video up by watching a couple matches. If you'd like to start out with a rugby league match, which might be the better place to start just because it's more similar to American football, I highly recommend the 2015 grand final between the Brisbane Broncos and the North Queensland Cowboys of Australia's National Rugby League, which is basically the Australian Rugby Super Bowl. It's available for free on YouTube.
And that's
if you'd like to follow up with a rugby union match,
no, that's
the
rugby
more
league.
common
My
version
bad.
worldwide, and it's generally what people mean by the term rugby outside of the places where rugby league is specifically popular. I might actually point you towards a recent match, the 2022 Women's Rugby World Cup final between England and New Zealand. Both of the matches that I'm recommending are electric and highly competitive and very fun to watch. So they are fun regardless of how much rugby knowledge you are bringing into it. I promise you that by the end of it, you'll have a much better sense of this game. If you have further questions, feel free to leave comments. If this is anything like my Cricket Explained for Baseball.
Honestly, what I think I'm going to do for my next couple videos, I think I'm going to react to some stuff that you guys are putting in the comments, but I also want to react to the biggest hits. I want to react to some highlights. I want to react to a bunch of stuff, rugby and other sports too. Just let me know in the comments down below. If you liked the video, please like the video. Subscribe. I'm so close to 500 subs. I'm trying to hit it before the end of the year. See you guys later. Peace.